Hello Baker family, John here, and I just wanted to make a video giving some of the main highlights of what it is that we know about our family history. So, as most of you already know, when Grandma Dell was alive, she had done a bunch of research on our family history. A bunch of really cool research, by the way. And when she had passed on, she left that research to my father, or I don't know, maybe he just took it. I'm not sure how my dad ended up with it. But nonetheless, though, my dad ended up with it. And then when he had passed on, he had left that research to me. And so I just wanted to make a video kind of giving some of the main highlights of what it is that Grandma Dell had found. Now, I do plan on making a series of videos about our family history, and so please be sure to subscribe if you're interested in learning more, so you'll get notifications when I post new videos out. I have actually already made one video. I'm probably going to post this one first, or probably about right at the same time I'll post the two videos. But nonetheless, though, that video, it's talking about a DNA test that my father had taken when he was still alive. So my dad, he had passed away in December of 2017, as most of you already know. And the year before that, in December of 2016, I had purchased him a DNA test for Christmas. And when we had gotten the results back, at that time, we primarily just focused on the general information that Ancestry.com provides. And now, don't get me wrong, it gives a lot of really cool general information, but that's really, what we focused on at first. It wasn't until last year, this was around September, October timeframe of 2021, that I got a little curious and I got back in there trying to dig a little deeper to see if I could figure out anything else. And I'd figured out how to use a search function on their website. And I am pretty certain I figured out where our family actually landed in America at. And so if you would be interested in learning about some of the stuff that I'd found with Dad's DNA test, then please be sure to watch that video as well. I'll put a link in the description below this video to that one. So, if you are interested in it and would like to see it, then you can watch that one if you get some time. But nonetheless, though, I didn't want to include that video or that information in that video with this one because I didn't want to make this one too long. I wanted this one to be more, laser focused on our family line going back as far as we can go, and just kind of what it is that we believe about our family history and why it is that we believe it. And I'm actually remaking this video. I made it before, but it wasn't really that good, and so I'm making it again. But nonetheless, though, hopefully I don't screw up too bad in this one. With that said, I'm going to get started. Okay, so as most of you already know, there is a Baker Cemetery in Hardy, Sharp County, Arkansas, where we have a ton of relatives buried. My brother's buried there, my grandpa's buried there, all my grandpas up to my third great grandpa are buried there. Now my dad, he's buried in Fort Smith, Arkansas, but we do have a ton of family buried at Baker Cemetery. And I know for most of my family that I'm close to now, and y'all are aware of the Baker Cemetery and have been out there many times. This is a picture of the little sign that's out there. This is a picture of the chapel. For future generations, a cool little tidbit of information is that now this building right here, it was actually on a different spot of land when my grandpa was a child, but this building here was actually the schoolhouse that my grandpa went to school in as a child. I thought that was pretty cool. But nonetheless, though, that's out at Baker Cemetery now. It got moved out there, but that is Baker Cemetery. Now, as for our lineage going back, I'm actually just going to really quickly skim through all my grandpas up to my third great grandpa, mainly because, of that Baker Cemetery being there and the family from that area, and just it being so well established, that line up till then, and they're all buried in the same place and family around that area. I'm not going to spend too much time on this information, but I do want to at least just cover it real quickly. So you can find this at findagrave.com. So it actually gives the lineage back to what would be my 5th great grandpa. We're starting on this one. This is my grandpa, Walter Lee Baker. So my dad, he was Charles Ray Baker. He went by Chuck. My name is Jonathan Walter Baker. I go by John, but my middle name Walter, this is who I'm named after. My grandpa, he went by Walt. He was born in Sharp County, Arkansas. Now, he lived most of his life, at least while I was alive, in central Arkansas, and that's where I grew up at. But nonetheless, whenever he passed away, he was buried at Sharp County. This is he's got a real headstone out there now, actually. This is an old picture. I even think in this older picture, it's got a wrong date for his birth, but it's what's out there now is accurate. This date right here is accurate, but nonetheless, though, this is my grandpa Baker, and he is buried at Baker Cemetery. His father was William Albert Baker. This is my 1st great grandpa. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was handed down to me that he went by Albert. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's what was handed down to me, is he went by Albert. But this is his headstone. He's out at Baker Cemetery, Hardy, Sharp County, Arkansas. Now, the Baker Cemetery, I think it's like right outside of Hardy, but right around that area. Nonetheless, though, his father was Lewis Baker. This would be my 2nd great grandpa. And then his father was John Baker, which would be my 3rd great grandpa. Now, this guy right here, he was actually the one that donated the land for Baker Cemetery. So that would be him right here. This is a picture of him, and this is a picture of his headstone. It's not easy to see in this picture, but nonetheless, though, he had fought out of Company K out of St. Louis, Missouri. He had lived in Iowa at the time, and he had come down from Davenport. But nonetheless, though, I'll talk about more on that in a second. But this is my 3rd great grandpa, John. Now, I knew about our family history up till him for quite some time. I even remember as a child knowing a lot about Hardy. Like, my dad had talked about Hardy quite a bit, although we never personally lived there. He talked about, his dad grew up there, and he talked about Hardy a lot. And I remember him, saying oral tradition was that we had come down from Iowa. But nonetheless, though, I remember going out to Baker Cemetery several times whenever I was a kid. But that was really all I personally knew about our family history until Grandma Dell dug in deep and did all that research that she had done. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you, she came up with some golden nuggets of information. Now, I'm obviously not going to be able to go over all that. You just saw the box. I'm not going to be able to go over all that in this. I'm literally just going to be hitting on a pittance of it. But nonetheless, so I want to go over some of the main documents that help us track our family back. So probably the coolest document of all that I think she found, at least in my opinion, was this letter right here. So this was a letter written by Charles Almond Baker in 1935 when Charles was 69 years old. So he was born in 1866. He wrote this in 1935 when he was 69. But he wrote a letter outlining everything he knew about our family's history. Now the thing is, Charles was the younger brother of John Baker, of my 3rd great grandpa John. So my 3rd great grandpa John was born in 1847. His brother Charles Almond Baker, if you can see the mouse down here, he was born in 1866. And he wrote a letter outlining everything he knew about our family's past. And boy, let me tell you, when Grandma Dell found this letter, that opened up some doors for research for her, right? I mean, this was a good one. Now, probably some of the coolest things I think that he had mentioned in this letter are some of the things that he mentions at the top. And I'll get to that in a second here, but I want to first scroll down, and I want to read a little bit about what he talks about when he talks about his brother John. See if I can even find it. Where was it at here? Okay, here it is. Now, another thing you'll notice about the letter, he does mention Salem, Oregon several times here. So he mentions like a Silverton, Oregon. He mentions a West Salem, Oregon, there, etc. That was actually where Charles ended up moving to. So the guy that wrote this letter, he ended up moving out to Salem, Oregon. So that's why that's here. But nonetheless, though, right below it, he says, my brother John Baker lived in Muscatine County, Iowa, most of the time till the year 1852, when he moved with his family to Hardy, Sharp County, Arkansas, where he got land in the Ozark Mountains in the north part of Arkansas. Now, one thing you will notice about the letter as well is that sometimes he does get some dates wrong. And like at the very beginning of the letter, he talks about a first, second, and third grandpa named John Baker, or like great grandpa, or things like that. Like he'll sometimes like mix up the ordering, or like say great grandpa when he should have just said grandpa, or great great grandpa when he should have just said grandpa, things like that. But you got to remember, the guy was 69 years old when he wrote the letter, and he gave some extremely valuable information for our family research. But nonetheless, though, I just say that because this date right here, 1852, that's wrong. His brother John didn't come down until after the Civil War, and not before it. He had only been about like 5 years old at this time. But nonetheless, though, it still seems to clearly connect to us. He goes on to say about his brother, he says he lived there and had 6 children: Rosie, Lewis, James, Hattie, Harry, and Willie. The names of these kids are right, so that would be a connection to us. Lewis right here, this is my second great-grandpa, so this would be my direct line. But he also mentions other things in this letter, and then there's an obituary that I'm going to show you in a second here that is in even further confirmation. But nonetheless, though, something else that he mentions that would connect this John Baker to us is that he mentions about him joining the Civil War. So he talks about him joining, or he was living in Muscatine County, Iowa at the time, and that was there's Davenport right around that area, and there's a Camp McClellan there. So if you can see the mouse, it says Camp McClellan, and so that's where he had actually, I guess, came down to St. Louis from. But then he goes on in this letter and he mentions St. Louis. If you can see the mouse, he says St. Louis there. And then he mentions down here that he enlisted in St. Louis. And that right there, that's a confirmation as well, because if you remember back to his headstone, this John Baker, which it's hard to see in this picture, but when you're actually at the cemetery, it's easier to see. He did join out of he fought out of a Company K, which was out of St. Louis. So I live in St. Louis, Missouri myself right now, and I was able to go down to the Civil War Museum and confirm this. There was a John Baker who served out of a Company K that was out of St. Louis, and he enlisted in St. Louis. And then whenever the guy that I spoke to at the museum even said it sounds right that he would have come down from Davenport. So all this just seems connections to us. This seems to be clearly a connection to the correct John Baker. And then when we get into his father and the obituary of his father, we're going to see even further confirmations there. But nonetheless, though, I'm not going to read this entire letter. I'm just going to hit on some of the main highlights. One other cool thing that he mentions is he mentions about his father, who was named Andrew. He had served in the Civil War as well as a cook. He had served for the North also. He says, after my brother John went to the Civil War, it was not long till my father volunteered and went to war. They took him to St. Louis with other soldiers from our part of the country. The officers found out my father was a cook by trade. They put him to cooking for all the soldiers at the barracks, and they kept him there cooking all the remainder of the war, etc. But nonetheless, though, I thought that was pretty cool. Both his brother John served in the Civil War, and then his father Andrew served in the Civil War as well. Both of them for the North. That would be my third and fourth great grandpa. And so, yeah, I thought that was cool. And another cool thing he mentions in this letter is he says that his father Andrew was a Baptist minister. I thought that was cool. And so, yeah, whenever someone writes a letter about their family history, obviously they're going to provide just such, golden information just about the family in general. And then also tons of excellent information when it comes to researchers that are further down the line, right? But nonetheless, though, one of the other things he mentions is he says, my grandfather, John Baker, number 3, lived in the Ohio Valley several years there. My Uncle Harvey Baker, Uncle Albert Baker, Uncle Lacey Baker, and my father, Andrew Baker, were born. So you can see Andrew Baker was his father. But whenever, you have stuff like this now where you've got names of, his uncles, he mentions up here a Paulina Baker and his Aunt Paulina Baker. So, whenever he starts giving names like this, that's where it makes it easier to where you can like start connecting the dots of, him being related to us, right? And so one awesome piece of information that Graham Aldell had found was, like I said before, there was an obituary of my fourth great grandpa Andrew. His obituary was found. That was Graham Aldell. She had found Andrew Baker's obituary. And now I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I do want to hit on some highlights. But I thought this was an extremely valuable piece of information for Graham Aldell to find for us. So now this was out of the Muscatine Journal in Muscatine, Iowa, and it was for Andrew Baker. Now, if you go down here, and if you can see the mouse, it says he is survived by two sons, John of Sharp County, Arkansas, and Charles residing in Oregon. Now, this should be a P instead of a K right there. There's no such thing as a Sharp County, Arkansas. But nonetheless, John of Sharp County, Arkansas, and Charles residing in Oregon. That's pretty cool. That's a hit. And then he says he is a brother of ex-supervisor Harvey Baker, which was one of the names he mentions. Paulina Baker down here. This obituary says his parents were John Baker and Rhoda Simpkins. That's who Charles says his grandpa was John Baker. So overall, it seems to be a clear connection to us, right? But nonetheless, though, I thought this was another really cool piece of information, was that obituary. And, he goes on, talks about so many other really cool things in this letter. And now I'm going to scroll up to the top now. This is the part where he kind of goes back as far as he can with his memory to as far as he could with our family history. And so I'm going to read some of that to you now. It says, the first I know of my forefathers, my great-grandfather and his wife and their people lived in the state of New York in the year of 1776 and before that time. And he underlined, before that time. We do not know how long before that time that our forefathers came to America or what country they came from. It has been handed down that long ago there was German and Irish blood in my forefathers' veins, but not while I can remember. Now, according to my dad's DNA test, we are primarily from England. We've got a little bit of English and a little bit of Irish in us, or a little bit of German and a little bit of Irish, but we are primarily of English ancestry, at least according to my dad's DNA. So we're from England. But nonetheless, though, he goes on to say, my great-grandfather served in the War of 1776 against England. My great-grandfather's name was John Baker. He served 8 years in this war. He goes on to say, if you can see the mouse, skip down a little bit, I do not know any more about my people to the year of 1812, when the war broke out between the United States and England again. My great-grandfather, John Baker, lived in New York State and enlisted in the United States Army, served most of the time in New York State and Virginia, stationed most of the time at a fort at Hampton Roads, Virginia. After the Second War with England was over, my great-great-grandfather, number 2 John Baker, went back to New York State. And this is what I mean, kind of sometimes he'll say great-grandpa when he should have just said grandpa, or great-great when he should have just said one great. But nonetheless, though, this is still some just extremely valuable information for us. Now, where we come into the dead end is actually at this John Baker here that served in the American Revolution. Really, all we have on him is this letter. We just have that his name was John Baker, he served in the American Revolution, and he was from the state of New York. That's really all we have on him. Now, we got a lot of great information on this John Baker that served in the War of 1812, which would be my 5th great-grandpa. So we got a lot of really cool information on him, and I'll share some of that with you in a second. But before doing that, though, I just want to point out the fact I thought this was cool. So my third great grandpa was named John Baker, and he served in the Civil War for the North. My fourth great grandpa was named John Baker, and he served in the Civil War for the North as a cook. My fifth great grandpa was named John Baker, and he served in the War of 1812. And then my sixth great grandpa was named John Baker, and he served in the American Revolution. I thought that was pretty awesome. Maybe it's just me, but I thought that was pretty cool. But nonetheless, though, this letter obviously, it just, to me, I thought this was such a golden thing that she had found. But she found tons of other stuff. You saw the box there. There's so many things that she found out about the family history. I'm really just hitting on the highlights of like taking the lineage back as far as we can go and giving some of the main highlights of the key documents that we have to support it. Some of the other things we have is, like I said, we do have some documents on this John Baker that served in the War of 1812. One thing that we have about him, at least, now I'll get to the pension records in a second. Now, I should have downloaded this to my computer, but I didn't. I don't think you'll be able to see it at all. But nonetheless, though, this is a census, an 1860 census from Scott County, Iowa. And what it says in this census, and I don't think you'll be able to see it, but yeah, and it's going to go out of focus if I do that. I knew it. How do I even get it back in focus? And I don't want to make it through this entire video. It just got that long. All right, what's going to happen is I'm going to have to turn it off and then turn it right back on, because I was on a roll there. Okay, let me turn it off, and then I will, I'll cut it to a new one. Okay, I'm back. I got the focus right. I'm not going to zoom in that far on this one again, but so y'all are just going to have to trust me on this census. You can look it up yourself by any means. It's a 1860 census from Scott County, Iowa, but it does have on here John Baker and a Rhoda, it says right below it, and then it has their ages, which is John was 66 at the time and Rhoda was 63. But hey, just something else that's confirmation on everything, right? Like, we had all, that other stuff, but, you just, each of these little documents just adds a little bit more evidence to it. In addition to that, there is a War of 1812 pension application files. I thought that was pretty cool. And so if you do Control F, and I'm going to type in Simpkins, because Baker's a little bit too common of a last name. And what you see here, it says John Baker, 1794 to 1873. That's when he would have been alive. He served in Virginia. He was from Scott County, Iowa. He was married to Rhoda Simpkins. And then this is the date that they got married. Now, that's another thing in this letter. So he mentions in this letter, like, what would be my fifth great grandpa, the one that served in the War of 1812. He started off in New York, and then he migrated over to Claremont County, Ohio for a little bit. That's actually where he married my fifth great grandmother, Rhoda. Then they moved from there. They had moved to a town right outside of Indianapolis called Bethel. He says in the letter it was like 20 miles outside of Indianapolis called Bethel. They lived there for a little bit, and then they ended up making their way over to that Scott County, Muscatine County, Iowa area, Bluegrass, Iowa, and that's where they ended up settling down. And then it was a couple of generations later, whenever it was my third great grandpa, which would be Charles's brother, the one that wrote this letter, that had moved down to Hardy, Arkansas. But nonetheless, though, I still thought all this was pretty cool. It's all some pretty solid information, considering you got census records, you've got War of 1812 pension application files, you've got an obituary that his son had written, you've got, or not that he written, but you've got the obituary of his son that mentions John Baker and Rhoda Simpkins. We have a letter from his grandson Charles. So when going back to him, that's some pretty solid research, right? And I know I kind of skimmed through my first and second great grandpa, but again, William Albert, that would have been, I've got uncles that are still alive today. That would have been their grandpa. They confirm William Albert was her grandpa. my grandpa, his grandpa would have been Lewis. It's like, so like those types of things. Nonetheless, though, you know, and especially with Baker Cemetery being there, we have great documentation on it going back to him. But it was the going past that. And I thought just these documents that Grandma Dill had found and all the research that she had done, man, it was just golden, and it really got us back in the history. Now, really, like I said before, where we came into the standstill is this John Baker here that had served in the American Revolution. All we have on him is this letter right here. Like this website, Find a Grave, it goes back. Oh, I went the wrong way. Hopefully it didn't. Okay, Andrew Baker, and then it has John Baker. This is the one that served in the War of 1812. This is his headstone. He's in Bluegrass, Scott County, Iowa. But this is where Find a Grave ends. It doesn't even mention this sixth great grandpa, which would be my sixth great grandpa, that had served in the American Revolution. This letter here is all we have on him. So we know his name, John Baker. He served in the American Revolution, and he was from the state of New York. The only other thing that we could potentially have on him, and I'm sure we have some more in here that can narrow it down, and I'll kind of go into that in some future videos, like some leads that we potentially have and kind of why we've come into dead ends with them. But nonetheless, though, another potential clue is that he says, Charles says in this letter that there was a John Baker 1, 2, and 3. And so that would indicate that his dad could have been named John Baker. That would have been my seventh great grandpa, but we don't even have information on him, this one, John. And so, you know, I tried to go down routes of like, you know, there was Rhoda Simpkins' father was named Ephraim Simpkins. There was he mentions in this letter a Parrington, which actually ended up being a Samuel Perrin, which I'll mention about in later videos, and that his father was Lemuel Perrin. So I was trying to connect the dots between, okay, was Ephraim and Lemuel running buddies, and was this sixth great grandpa running buddies with them? I don't know. I was kind of going down some of those directions, and it's still kind of running into some dead ends. I'll make more videos on that. I don't want to make this too long, but really this is where we've got it up till now. We've got solid up to the 5th, and then we've got this letter here on the sixth great grandpa. And overall, though, I still thought all of this was extremely cool, right? Like, you know, that's our family history going back, and I think we've got some, you know, pretty solid documentation on it, getting it back to that point. But I love this stuff. I want to keep doing it. I want to, you know, keep doing history, you know, as a side hobby. And you know, if you like me doing this family history and you want to see more videos, please subscribe to the channel so you'll get a notification anytime I post out something new. But nonetheless, though, that's really all I had for today. I just wanted to kind of take our family line back as far as we could and show that evidence for it. I hope you enjoyed watching, but thank you definitely for watching, everyone, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a great day. Bye.